Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trucked Before. You knew it was coming. It's here. Gambit Part 2, because Gambit Part 1, just 2 weeks ago. Gambit Part 2 on It's All Been Trucked Before. Speaking of Part 2, when you get done with this episode, make your own Part 3. Go get on Facebook and follow us there. It's All Been Trucked Before. That's what we are on there. We're on Facebook. Get some supplemental stuff. We're posting funny promos, but we're also other Trek related stuff. Hopefully you're watching the new stuff and you occasionally hear us talk about it, and you hear or see Keith close his ears or groan because he thinks we've spoiled something for him. Usually we probably haven't, but anyway, hey, get on Facebook. Maybe we'll spoil something for you, but probably not. I think we'll make your day. Hopefully this will make your day. Gambit Part 2 on It's All Been Trucked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trucked Before. Some of your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
Jimmy-Jerome. We are here to talk Star Trek The Next Generation, Gambit Part 2. What's your first impression?
We, last week on our DS9, on the episode DS9, The Siege, we talked about how some of the TNG two-parters were disappointing.
Sure.
I wouldn't, which is not a great intro for this. It sounds like I'm going to say it's disappointing. It wrapped it up fine. I think we've seen worse two-parters and worse part twos. I think for this entire two-parter, it feels like there's a lot of really good bits and scenes and interesting things. Collectively, it doesn't seem to be awesome. So I felt that way about each of them individually, too. I think there's some cool stuff in here that I wrote that we'll talk about. But it felt like we were biding our time until we got to the next cool thing. And then we'd bide our time and then it'd be the next cool thing. I think I liked it overall. But yeah, and we'll get into it deeper. We'll see if I land any differently. But yeah, still less than it's less than the sum of its parts, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you. I think it's not the worst Next Gen two-parter, but it's nothing to get excited about either. It's I mean, it's better than Descent, in my opinion, how we started the season. But yeah, it's not like Chain of Command good or...
No, and I think it's a lot of, and like I just said, I feel like it's a lot of, well, here's some things we want to do that are cool and really interesting. How do we pull all those together? And they found a way to do it, but it's not the most interesting way.
Yeah, agreed. So we start out with the Enterprise being shot, because that's where it was left off.
Yeah, we talked last week about the recaps at the beginning, and I was like, last time on is always helpful because it was helpful here. And then as the further it went along, I'm like, oh yeah, we end up with the laser on the, and to that point, yeah, it turned out that they had turned down they signaled to Riker to turn down the phasers essentially, and they did their thing. And so the bluffing and gambling by Data, I found I enjoyed that.
I would have enjoyed it had he not taken so long to do it. Because they finished firing and then they're like, they fired on us. Let's discuss it. Yes, we should fake some damage. And it's just like, dudes, they're watching you. They know you fake the damage now, it's too late. You have to do that in the moment. I feel like because Data's an android and can go super fast, he should have figured it out, ran to the panel, did it, and then explained himself, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, because there are some episodes where he does do that, where he's like, well, I figured it out a while ago. And there are some episodes like this where he doesn't.
The Picard at the end of last week, really, after he told Riker, like, we should become enemies in front of them, they then cooperated at the end of the episode, and I was like, oh, they're already not doing it? So I feel like that's why, in the beginning here, Picard had to goad Riker into punching him, because they'd just been too chummy, and so they had to get back on track with their plot.
Much like Lee Nallis jumping into that phaser last week like he wanted to, it was like, it seemed like Picard could have easily avoided that punch from Riker. But, even I guess if you're acting in the real world like your spies, you still want to signal your partner like this is happening. And so, as an actor, he did it right. But right before that, it's a general thing. And I guess that actually later I think they solve it. But so I was like, why are there Romulan? I was just trying to figure out, and maybe this is just what are artifacts, but they kept talking about Romulan artifacts. And in my mind, like, it's not like they had warp drive thousands of years ago and were spreading it all over different planets, right? So they must just be like, oh, Romulans left here a couple of 100 years ago. And then it turns out they were Vulcan artifacts anyway, or at least the one was. But
Right. So Robin Curtis, early on, her character figures out that I was actually surprised she did not figure out everything about Picard and his plan at that moment. I mean, in the next scene she does. But at that point, it seemed like she really had things figured out like right away. And give her credit for her character being smart, Talera being smart. But it really, like, early on, put a big wrench into what they were trying to do. But she said she was a Vulcan intelligence, so it was fine, right?
Yeah. I can't remember where this is, but Riker, I think he's talking to Baran. Yeah. They're talking about how much money Riker's going to make and it being profitable and this stuff. But the look on Riker's face or Jonathan Frakes' face looks like the same face he makes when he's talking about when he's flirting with a woman or talking about making love to a woman throughout the series. So I enjoyed that very much. It was like, I'm just going to pretend like everything you say about this, you're talking about a beautiful woman. And that's when I'm going to smile about that. So I very much enjoyed the way he played that.
I mean, that whole thing where the leader, Baran, was talking to Riker, he's immediately like trusting Riker. Even though he's saying, I don't trust you, everything he was doing was trusting him.
Yeah.
And then he does tell Riker to kill Galen, but...
Yeah, and you knew that was coming. And
of course.
And to that point, it's like, because Picard Galen's thing is like, this guy's an idiot. He's the worst officer in the fleet. But Baran's like, well, I don't trust you, but you know what? I will, even though this guy over here who's been with me a while says you're an idiot. So.
Yeah. Data dresses down Worf. I found that scene very affecting, where he talks about the difference between head of security versus being first officer. I do think Data's a little mean and harsh in this moment, and I kind of get why. I feel like feels like that's how the captain has to be.
Right.
But I think he could have delivered it a little softer. But I still appreciate the end where he's like, I'm sorry if I've ended our friendship over this. And Worf's like, no, I'm the one who's sorry.
Yeah.
And then after Worf leaves, Data does the Picard maneuver, the one where he pulls down the uniform front.
Yeah. So there is a little bit of emulating. And I just thought it was so much. It was a great, like, I'm sorry, buddy. No, I'm sorry, buddy. All right.
Well, it's the way Worf takes it to heart, which really shows Worf's growth.
Yeah.
Because I don't see a season 2 or season 3 Worf making those adjustments the way this Worf does. And every time the camera lingers on him later in this episode where he wants to do his thing, but he's not going to, Michael Dorn's just killing it with his, yes, sir.
Great eye acting. Yeah, it was great. It was, I wrote touching scene, very effective.
Yeah.
So again, that's one of those moments. It's like we have this artifice going on that's kind of interesting. It's not super interesting, but then this is going on. It's like, all right, you got me this, so I'll take that until the next one comes along. So
yeah,
I'll take it.
Picard tells Riker, Will, you always seem to be after my job. Which,
that again, there's another.
That's a good tongue-in-cheek commentary that you can only do 7 seasons into a show.
And the whole time they're in there having that conversation, I think it's the one where it looks like they're in the break room. I'm like, should they be talking in some kind of code or something? Because it seems like, is it maybe Picard's checked it out, but
I would think Baran would be spying on his people.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. I thought we were going to find that out. But maybe I asked this 2 weeks ago when we did part 1, but Picard didn't go there on purpose. He just ended up getting abducted, and then
Well, he was investigating and knew they were up to something, and then got himself added to the crew. Yeah,
that's right.
Riker was just abducted.
That's right. That was the Gambit. Yep.
Yeah.
One fashion note. I have another one later. Fashion. Actually, you know what? We'll do both of them now. Fashion.
Sure.
I think those neck things would be a good like jewelry kind of thing. I think those could catch on as long as they didn't actually inflict pain on you. But I like the idea. They're just like lower earrings. You know, the little squares they had on their neck. So
yeah, I
thought, oh, that was kind of cool. And the other thing is the straps on Galen Picard's whatever he was wearing. I'm like, I don't know what those do, what they're for, but I mean, they look fine. But
no, I agree. So that's when Talera reveals this is about the time where she says, "Yeah, I know everything. Vulcan isolationist. I'm working to take them down. They can kill with a thought by amplifying energy." That seems like magic, right?
I wrote. Oh, I did write that. Oh, so like the Force? I don't like this.
I mean, I don't love that they do this Vulcan magic, but I will say, to their credit, this isn't the first time we've seen Vulcan magic in Star Trek. So
it's true.
You know,
I would imagine there's a lot of Romulan Vulcan confusion. I mean, they started this as the same people, so it makes sense.
Sure.
Like, oh, I thought you were Romulan. No, I'm a Vulcan. So, which takes me back to the Birthright episode where Worf was like, I couldn't be around a Romulan. So wait, would you be cool with a Vulcan then? Or are you also a racist against them as well?
Yep.
I mean, I know he has his reasons for not liking Romulans, like Kirk has for not liking Klingons. But anyway,
sure,
that's happened a lot. And while we're there, I thought Robin Curtis's voice, like her Slavic voice, she was trying to be a Vulcan. It came off very wooden, which can happen. I think there's a tricky line. But I thought the way her voice was for this, and maybe it's because I thought she was Romulan and then she's a Vulcan. I thought she hit just the right pitch, like a Nimoy, and not saying she's good, but your Nimoys and your better your Mark Leonards and those guys who played Vulcans. There's a person here, but I'm very logical without it sound like I am a robot. And so I like that she figured it out.
Yeah, she's willing to sacrifice the ship, which I think her saying that sells the idea that she might be legit. She's like, if we can't do this, I'm going to blow the whole ship up.
Yep, she got me.
Of course, she's lying, but
right. But like I said, she got me. And I thought for a heavy exposition scene, which it turns out it was also a who's zooming who scene. It was pretty compelling. And again, it's the way she delivered it, the voice, and then especially later when it turns out, oh, by the way, that was even more interesting in hindsight. At the time, I was like, oh, this is really interesting exposition. And then later, it's like, oh, it was also I'm telling you a total line of crap. So and then the next thing I said was Klingon blood wine. Do you think Klingons just call it blood wine?
They do.
I'm sure that's
instead of Klingon blood wine. You probably I'm sure they do. So you bring up the blood wine. We should talk about that. There's another Klingon. His name is Coral, played by James Worthy. That the Enterprise D comes across. James Worthy is best known for, according to IMDb, this one episode of The Next Generation, as well as one episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, one episode of Arliss, and the short Building Minds with Chess. Considering he only has 7 credits on IMDb, I guess I will
tell you what James Worthy is actually best known for is being a Hall of Fame NBA player.
I see that. He is 6'9", so that wasn't a trick shot that he was so much taller than.
No, and I enjoyed that they because last week when I was looking up something on the episode, there's James Worthy showed up. I'm like, what? Did I miss this? And then it's like, oh, this week. And I was like, okay, they're going to use this. And they did. He was a great player for the Lakers. He was the MVP, actually, of the NBA Finals when the Lakers three-peated and beat my Pistons. I'm not going to get any deeper into that. But I always liked James Worthy, a really good player. I appreciated him. And I think he still does analysis and that kind of stuff. But good-looking guy. I like that they were like, and I don't know, and again, I didn't look into this either, but I think they're like, yeah, we'll have you on the show. And we're going to give you just one-word lines or 2-word lines and just look big and menacing. It's like, yep, he's got it.
Yeah, it was, he didn't have to say much. It was pretty
that's smart. And he may have been like, yeah, that's cool. I'll be there.
Well, it worked for the character because they were talking about how most uncooperative, they said. Yes. And he was, because he didn't want to talk to them for good reason, his character, because he was trying to wait to do the pass-off. And this was just getting in his way. So I get it. Even though it led to that really funny scene with Worf and Crusher doing the... after Worf does the linguistic gymnastics to justify bringing him on without giving him away, and Troy gives him quite the look after that, which I appreciated her amusement. But then you could tell when they get into the shuttle bay that Crusher's never done an inspection before. He's like, oh, I need to scan this. I don't see any radiation yet. It's like, yeah, you can do those, but you usually send a nurse. You don't do them.
Yeah,
that's not a senior staff job.
Whole health and whatever whatever investigation. That was good stuff too. But
then the Klingon pouring the wine on the carpet was a great bit without even tasting it. And Picard gets himself assigned to the landing party with Riker. with Galen to beam over. And at that point, Baran's like, kill Picard. And I'm like, but you said he was supposed to verify the thing first. And I know when it actually went down, they waited till he said, yes, this is verified before they shot at him. But that's not the way it seemed. It seemed like he was just saying, oh, never mind. Forget what I said. Just kill him.
Yeah. Baran, I felt like was such a cliche kind of villain that it was like, we're just going to make him say whatever we need to have happen next, which I guess points to him not being a good leader and like everyone on the ship said. So,
but I mean, this was written by Ron D. Moore, and I expect better of him.
Yes, I do. And speaking of which,
story by Niran Shakar, but Ron D. Moore with the teleplay.
I know I've talked about For All Mankind for a while, and I just finally started season 3, and John Busser, a playwright we know, I asked him about it. I said, so how was season 3? He's like, well, it's different from the first 2. And again, I felt this way with the first 2 as well. It's like occasionally it gets real soap opera-y, which I feel like is also a Ronald D. Moore thing, but then it always ends up pulling it out. It's like, okay, you made it worth it. You justified it. The science is there. And so I'm not going to dog on it. It's a really, I recommend it to our listeners and everything. But to get back to this episode, I
watch Ron D. Moore's other series, Outlander, and I enjoy that very much.
Oh yeah, I have not. I've heard good things about that.
I recommend that as well. It's pretty faithful to the books, though. He doesn't have to invent that much.
Okay. I thought, and I didn't notice until this week, really, the extra pirates. I keep calling them pirates on the ship. Mm-hmm. A couple of them this week. The 3 that were in the background. They all look like they were from like an '80s metal band or Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, or I guess any of the Mad Max movies. It was a very eclectic crew in fashion and in appearance.
Yeah, I agree with that. On the Enterprise, when Galen and Riker and that crew beam over, they stun the Enterprise crew. They shoot Worf and Beverly, which, wow. But then they use the shuttle transporter, which how many episode plots could be resolved if you remember that the shuttles could transport it? You don't have to go to the ship's transporter room. So I appreciated Ron D. Moore going, I got this one. This time they're going to use the shuttle's transporter.
Well, and somebody says, I was, you know what, I'll look this up in the meantime. But yeah, I was like, and I'm sure everyone at home was like, they're stunned. They're not killed. We know they're stunned.
Oh, yeah,
especially based on the earlier phaser thing. But speaking of changing or saving things, then later, and maybe I'm jumping too far ahead, but later when Baran goes to kill Picard with the neck thing, and it ends up killing Baran, he's like, I changed the transponder codes earlier. It's like, why didn't you just do that earlier? Way earlier. But maybe he was worried it would blow his cover if he hit that button and it hit him, but I don't know if it would have mattered. But
I wondered if maybe he did do it earlier and there was just no cause to it. Because we hadn't seen him shock Picard in a while.
That's a good point.
So when Riker and Picard beam over to the shuttle bay, Crusher and Worf don't seem to react to them.
Yeah.
But Troy and Data do when they beam into the conference room. And they should all be reacting because they all think Picard's still dead at this point. They don't know that he's alive. So I liked that Troy and Data did the double take, but Crusher should really have done the double take.
Here's the line, and I am not a fan of puns, but I enjoyed this. Mm-hmm. Troy says he's all right, he's only stunned. And Data says, I must admit, I'm experiencing a similar sensation.
Nice.
So he's evolved from the Joe Piscopo phase of his
comedy. Yeah.
So I usually don't like puns, but I thought that was, and maybe this is more falls into wordplay. I love the way he played that. I love that. Ronald D. Moore, thank you. Good job here. So
when Picard kills Riker, I like that he says, "Is he dead?" Which is why Data probably says yes, because he picks up. That's a good way to telegraph your plan without having to tell it, and his crew trusts him. I like that.
Yeah, because you could just shoot him again otherwise. But so it makes sense.
Picard, when they had said the code, they did the mutiny. Picard knows he's safe because he switched his code, but the rest of the crew don't have their codes switched. And maybe he could say that's why I stepped up and led the mutiny, but because they're just like, oh, you can't kill us all before we take you down. But I feel like the crew should then be mad at him for, I mean, they're mad at him for other reasons, but they should be mad at him for like, hey, you knew you were safe, but you let the rest of us put our necks out on the line.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I think this is I can't remember what class it was in, and it may have been law school, but somebody talked about, it's always like, well, there's 80 people in the crowd and there's just one guy with a gun, so there's no way they can pull it off. And it's like, no, because all 80 people are like, I'm not the one that's going to get shot. So that doesn't always work. But that's what I thought about here is like, well, sure, you could all do it, but he's going to kill one of you.
Yeah.
But,
well, they all were counting on it being Picard because that makes it easier to fall in line behind him.
yes. Yeah. And that's where I really thought, oh man, this looks like an 80s or early 90s metal band. So then Talera reveals she's not a Vulcan operative or whatever. And I was like, I didn't see that coming. So.
I did, not in the moment where she confessed to being intelligence, but before he says we're going to Vulcan, I saw it coming. I was like, I got it. I
did have the thought right before it, like, well, what are we doing for the last 13 minutes of this episode? Because Picard's in charge now, so I think we're good here. Let's get this done. It's like, wait a minute, there's 13 minutes left. I just happened to have paused it right before then. So, but I didn't know that was a twist. So,
well, she betrays him to the crew, which makes sense because she's bad. The shaky reasoning that she gives about she kills the terrorist, but she's hesitant to shoot Picard, which doesn't make sense because she shouldn't be hesitant to shoot Picard.
Right.
And then the magic thing, only works against people that are hostile towards you. That's very convenient.
I wrote, we got into a real Day of the Dove situation there.
But I do think Worf should have at least got driven to a knee, even if he didn't die.
And I thought that's what they were going to do, but they didn't.
Yeah, I was shocked that Worf survived it intact. I guess you could maybe say it's because he was already controlling himself because of Data, but they didn't draw that connection.
I wish they'd had Picard do a big fake laugh like Shatner did in Day of the Dove. Like, but,
as a tribute.
Yes. I mean,
so
even the effect was similar to me today. It was much better to Day of the Dove, but yeah.
When they beam back on board Picard and Riker when it's all over, there's that whole like cheesy thing where they're like, well, Picard's been declared dead and Riker's a renegade facing court-martial. And then the Data lets Picard go to sleep, but is still going to take Riker to the brig. And he's like, he's joking. He's joking.
It made me laugh, but the logic of the joke doesn't make sense because he's like, well, Picard, you can't order me and neither can you. But then he follows Picard's orders.
Well, so the logic there could be it's the same order Data would given if he were in command, which he is in command.
That makes sense.
Because Riker is facing court-martial for a number of charges. So, but I can't see them actually charging him with anything based on the way he acted. Like, it was all smoke and mirrors. He didn't actually hurt anybody.
I'm going with based on what I thought was a top-level wordplay joke about I am feeling myself in a similar situation about being stunned. It's another Data bit. He's committing to bits and playing them out. So again, it did make me laugh. I did enjoy that part.
Yeah, it was a little too cheesy for my taste, but it was a cute ending, I guess.
Yeah.
Cutesy ending.
Yes.
My alternate episode was.
I was going there too. Go ahead.
My alternate episode was Talera, instead of being a secret evil Vulcan that tries to get, was actually Saavik working for Vulcan intelligence undercover.
Yes.
That would have been fun if it was actually Saavik, and then they had the connection with Spock and everything, and yeah.
My after she gave her initial exposition speech about, I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen, I'm going to stop this, was that every single person on that ship was there for a similar reason. None of them were actually mercenaries or pirates, including Buran. They all had different objectives other than that, but they were all like, well, I don't want them to know that I'm not doing this. So they were, none of them.
I'm a Ferengi businessman. Well, I'm a member of MI6.
Right. Yeah. They didn't want
that would be really good if they were like all spies at Double H.
Yes, that's what I wanted. Hey, Ryan Johnson, make that your next Knives Out or whatever. Knives
Out 2 was even better than Knives Out 1.
I enjoyed that.
Last Onion was wonderful.
I did too, yeah.
Yeah, that would have made it a sitcom, but I enjoyed that. That's a great pitch. I like it for what you're talking. Directed by Alexander Alexander Singer, one of our regular directors. Who was your annoyance this week?
Buran again. I just thought his character was just so like, I'm going to jump in here and it's not even a chaos thing. It's just more of a keep the episode going where we need to get to conflict.
I was annoyed by Baran, but I'm going to go with Data because I felt like he took it too far with the harshness. Yeah. Whereas if he's, and I think he would imitate Picard because that's the captain he's served longest and has the most respect for. And Picard is not that harsh. Picard can be harsh, but he's a lot gentler a lot of the time. And I would expect Data to try to emulate him rather than just be harsh.
So he got better with the Joe Piscopo. He's evolved from the Joe Piscopo comedy, but not quite as much with the Picard disciplining.
I guess.
Yeah.
Who are you going to drink with?
Crusher was in it for like 3 minutes, and I was just like, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it was she was funny. I know that this was part of the cell with James Worthy being in there. He's on a ramp above her, and somehow Gates McFadden looks super tiny. Yeah, I just thought she was entertaining in the episode too. So yeah, Crusher. I think last week I went with Tolera.
No, last week you went with Crusher.
Oh, I did. Well, wow, man. Yep. Okay. Well.
Yeah, you're on a Crusher roll, which I don't. I mean, I love Crusher, so I'm also
had the undercover outfit on. I couldn't deny that. Yeah.
I'm also repeating my last week and saying Robin Curtis, not Tolera, Robin Curtis, because I really enjoyed her in this. I want to talk to her about it.
I thought she was so good, and then this is it, right? She doesn't do another track, right?
Nah, this was it.
That's a bummer. Because I thought she got redemption.
No, we actually weren't able to rank part 1 because we were leaving it to Keith to tie break.
Oh wow!
And Keith is still not here, so we're going to have to try to rank part 2, knowing that part 1 is also. So let's start. Is part 2 better or worse than part 1?
I think as we talked through it, I kept saying like, man, there's these good parts, and I really like. I think I like. I'm gonna nudge this one above part 1.
I was gonna go the other way.
Perfect, Keith, you're in charge now. Keith, you're the captain now.
Would you put it above Liaisons?
Probably not. I feel like that's more cohesive, and I feel like its entire here's what we're gonna do is better than, like I said. Even though I liked a lot of the moments in this episode, yeah.
I agree. It belongs below that, and the bottom right now is Interface, which was Geordi and his mom, and I think it was better than that.
Yeah.
So right now, what we've got in the middle that we can't decide between is Gambit Part 1, Gambit Part 2, and Descent Part 2. Do you feel strongly if this belongs below or above Descent Part 2?
I think I enjoyed this more than Descent Part 2.
I would put this above as well. So let me make a note that we both would, because Descent's the one we disagreed on last week.
Yeah, and I know Keith is a big lore fan.
That's true. But I'm making a note that we would both have put Part 2 above Descent Part 2.
Yes.
Which is interesting because one of us, and I can't remember which one of us, thought Gambit Part 1 belonged below Descent Part 2. But was it the same one of us that thinks, I don't remember which one of us thought.
I don't either.
I think I thought it was better than Descent Part 2 because I didn't love Descent Part 2. I think you wanted it above Descent Part 2. Yeah. So I guess, but I said this would go below. So I would have it Gambit Part 1, Gambit Part 2, Descent. You're saying Gambit Part 1 should be below Descent, but this should be above Part 1. So you'd have it Descent, Gambit Part 2, Gambit Part 1. So let me make a note that is the way we would rank it because that, I think, matters.
Yeah.
Had better be back for the 6th episode this season, or we're going to have a hell of a time ranking these things. We'll have 2 completely separate ranks, and Keith has to just find a way to merge them. Next week, Deep Space Nine. Invasive procedures. A jealous Trill who has waited his entire life to receive a symbiote but never did decides to steal Daxus.
Oh.
And that jealous Trill is played by the great John Glover.
Oh, okay.
Lionel Luthor from Smallville.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Tim Russ also returns in a totally different character again.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm excited about that.
Until then, keep your Trills safe and live long.
And think peacefully. Just period. Think peacefully. And we'll all prosper.
It would sure be nice if the people in America that have guns could not shoot them at us if we were thinking peacefully.
It'd be nice, yeah.
There'd be a lot less mass shootings.
Yes, there would be. I think then everyone can have their guns and we can...
That's the $1 trillion idea. If you invent a gun that will only fire at people that are thinking hostile thoughts towards you, Yeah. I mean, I guess the gun rights advocates would probably say we should be able to shoot at whoever we want. It doesn't matter if they're thinking hostile thoughts. And we know that public perception and public opinion doesn't matter on gun rights because most of us want restrictions.
Yep.
And, until 2000, the Second Amendment had nothing to do with personal ownership of guns. So, because to bear arms was actually a military term and had nothing to do with personal ownership. Plus, it mentions the militia right there in it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We're going backward.
Anyway, we're not prospering.
We're not. Mm-mm.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?